Hey everyone. So in this video, we're going to be looking at JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson, his successor, and kind of what their plans were for America and how to make it a fairer, greater society, and to what extent they were either successes or failures. So we're going to start having a look at JFK's New Frontier speech. Now, JFK is a very young president, and he kind of wants to make America more modern. So I thought I'd show you his speech so we can kind of dissect some of the language and to see what his goals are and what his aims are. So he says, here at home, the changing face of the future is equally revolutionary, right? So we see words about change all the time. Revolutionary. The New Deal and the Fair Deal were bold measures for their generation. But this is a new generation. So he keeps highlighting this idea of change and newness. A technological revolution on the farm has led to an output explosion, but we have not yet learnt to harness that explosion usefully while protecting our farmers' rights to full parity income. So he's saying that even though we've got new technology, we don't have the legislation to protect our farmers. An urban population explosion has overcrowded our schools, so he's highlighting the areas that need work, cluttered up our suburbs, and increased the squalor of our slums. A peaceful revolution for human rights, demanding an end to racial discrimination, so we can see that he's supporting the civil rights movement in all parts of our community life, has strained at the leashes imposed by timid executive leadership. And that's saying we need to have a strong leader to be able to push the civil rights movement forwards. A medical revolution has extended the life of our elder citizens without providing the dignity and security those later years deserve. So they're living older, but they're suffering more. Okay. And a revolution of automation finds machines replacing men in the mines and mills of America without replacing their incomes or their training or their needs to pay the family doctor, grocer, and landlord. So machines are taking jobs. We need to create more jobs. There has also been a change, a slippage in our intellectual and moral strength. 7 lean years of drought and famine have withered a field of ideas. Blight has descended on our regulatory agencies, and a dry rot beginning in Washington is seeping into every corner of America. So this is painting a really bleak picture of America and American politics and American attitudes. He's saying, come on, guys, we need to wake up. We need to do something about the time that we're living in and the way that we're living. Too many Americans, oh, sorry, I missed a bit there. The expense account way of life, the confusion between what is legal and what is right. And again, we can refer that to civil rights, can't we? Legal and right don't seem to fit because people are doing what they think is right, but it's not necessarily what is legal. Too many Americans have lost their way, their will, and their sense of historic purpose. It is a time, in short, for a new generation of leadership, which he is offering, new men to cope with new problems and new new opportunities. All over the world, particularly in the newer nations, young men are coming to power. Now, he's only 42 when he comes to power, JFK. That is really young for a president. Who are not bound by the traditions of the past, men who are not blinded by old fears and hates and rivalries, young men who can cast off the old slogans and delusions and suspicions. But I believe the times demand a new invention, innovation, imagination, and decision. So, really positive words towards us at the end of his speech. I am asking each of you to be pioneers on that new frontier. My call is to the young in heart, regardless of age, to all who respond to the scriptural call. Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For courage, not complacency. So he says he doesn't want people to be stagnant. He doesn't want them to be complacent with how things is. He wants them to want change, is our need today. Leadership, not salesmanship. And the only valid test of leadership is the ability to lead and lead vigorously. A tired nation, said David Lloyd George, is a Tory nation. And the United States today cannot afford to be either tired or Tory. So they can't be just traditional. They've got to look at new ways of moving forward. And that's exactly what he wants to do. So let's have a look at when Johnson came in. So if you watched the last video, you'll have seen that Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 when he was going around the southern states calling for support for civil rights. And he's replaced by his, I've forgotten the word for deputy. sorry, this is an absolute baby brain here. He's supported by the man who is his second in command, and he's taken over by Lyndon B. Johnson. So I want the president who educated young children to be I want to be the president who educated young children to the wonders of their world, who helped to feed the hungry. So again, let's have a look at what he's talking about here. Schools, feed the hungry and prepare them to be taxpayers instead of tax eaters, so getting jobs, who helped the poor to find their own way, and who protected the right of every citizen to vote, for the rights of citizens in every election, who helped end hatred among his fellow men, so a reference to civil rights here, and who promoted love among people of all races and all nations and all parties, who helped to end war among the brothers of the earth. So similar to what JFK is saying, all right, they've got similar policies, similar ideas. They want to be able to make America a stronger, more cohesive country that's working together to end all of these problems that they are undoubtedly facing as a society. And the Democrats' Great Society is a set of domestic programs in the US by the Democrat presidents of the early 1960s, which are JFK and LBJ. The main goal was the elimination of poverty and racial injustice. So they're big aims. So let's see to what end they actually met them. Right, so I've got different categories here, and we're going to go through them and have a look at the successes and the failures of each of them. So civil rights, successes in this area, important government jobs are given to African Americans. So that is significant because if they're seen in more senior roles within the government, they're going to be taken more seriously in other areas of work. They created the CEEO, the Commission on Equal Employment Opportunity, and they stood up to some racist Southern politicians. However, JFK seemed too concerned with what Southern politicians and voters thought of him. The CEEO only helped those who were already in employment with the government. And he tried to get MLK to stop his march on Washington because he felt it might make some politicians even more keen to resist. So even though JFK does have a vested interest in civil rights and he wants to be supportive of civil rights, his politics is stopping him. He wants the support of the Southern politicians for other things. And he thinks that if he's trying to get the support of them for civil rights, they won't support him in other areas. So we've got a limited success there, which we see Lyndon B. Johnson having much more success in this area because he already has the support of the Southern politicians. Okay, so the economy. Successes here, they cut taxes to increase spending. So by charging people less money, they've got more expendable income, and we can get that cycle of prosperity going if people are spending more money. They invest $900 million in businesses to create new jobs. Grants are given to companies to buy new tech and train their employees in using this tech, and increase spending and creation of jobs in the armed forces. However, the new equipment led to some people losing their jobs. So as we said, machines we've seen are replacing people. By 1963, 4.5 million people were unemployed, only 1 million fewer than in 1960. Now, you could argue that 3 years isn't long enough to be able to measure to what extent that worked, but it's not a quick fix. And the unemployment rate for African Americans was twice that of white Americans. So again, if we're looking at the civil rights, there's obviously a massive disparity still there. Healthcare and decrease in poverty, which is one of their main things that they're looking at. There is an increased minimum wage from $1 to $1.25. That's a big increase. Okay. They made $4.9 million available for loans to improve housing, clear slums, and to build roads and telephone lines. So they're investing in getting people to a place where they may have just more pride and want to work. The Social Security Act increased benefits for the elderly and the unemployed. So JFK in his speech had referenced how people were getting older but weren't treated well. So that helps to tackle that problem. They raised money for research into mental illness, and there were plans for health insurance for the elderly, which was known as Medicare. So there's no NHS in America. All right. So in America, you either have health insurance or you have to pay for your medical care. And to give you a reference, it costs $40,000 to have a baby in America. Okay. So giving people health insurance as they're older means that they're not becoming bankrupt because they can't afford their medical care. So that's a really important part of making sure that they are looked after in their old age, these people. However, failures, minimum wage obviously is only going to be helpful if you are already in work. Loans are only useful if people could afford the repayments. So you're counting on people having a basic income to be able to pay the loans back. And the US Congress defeated JFK's proposals for Medicare. So Medicare is not passed. Okay. Then education. Successes. JFK establishes the Peace Corps. Now, the Peace Corps is still a thing. You may hear it referenced in American TV programs. It sends volunteers abroad to assist people in poorer countries. And this is kind of giving the young people the values that he's saying in his speech that Americans have lost, right? They've lost their way, they've lost their sense of right and wrong. So it's kind of instilling in them these values of we should be helping each other, we should be helping other people, not even just Americans. They worked as teachers, nurses, doctors, and technical advisors. Huge success with young Americans, and it does still survive today. And he was keen to introduce an education law to give more money to schools. However, the efforts to provide funds for school were denied. Remember that the way it works in America is he can only offer something and then it has to be passed by Congress. So if these are all being blocked by Congress, there's nothing as a President JFK can do about it, because Congress is dominated by politicians from the southern states who refused to support him after clashing over civil rights. So as we referenced earlier, his reason for not kind of badgering those southern politicians is because he doesn't want this to happen. He doesn't want them to stop him passing the laws that he knows will do the Americans a lot of good. Okay, so Johnson's Great Society. So JFK is looking at the new frontier. Johnson is looking at his Great Society. You may have noticed that since FDR's New Deal, they've all got their little slogan that they follow and want to be known by. So Johnson stands in his own right for election in 1964 because he'd only just stepped in for Johnson and for Kennedy, and he wins easily. So people want to see this plan being carried out. The Great Society hoped to create an American that used America, that used its wisdom and wealth to advance the quality of our American civilization. He wants to end poverty and racial injustice and find a place where every child can find knowledge to enrich his mind and to enlarge his talents. So, civil rights, I'm not going to go through them all again, but civil rights, he's got a very different approach to dealing with politicians than JFK. He is intimidating and manipulative, whereas if you look at JFK and his approach, he's more sort of timid and uses his personality to sort of be a bit more gentle. He was from the South. Now, this is a really big thing. The people from the South are trusting him because he is one of them. And he could relate to the concerns of the politicians there. He has 2 significant civil rights laws passed, which Kennedy couldn't get passed because he doesn't have the support of the people in the South. So it is much easier for LBJ to get these passed. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bans discrimination based on race and gender in employment and ends segregation in all public places. And then 1965, the Voting Rights Act, which banned literacy tests and other things which stopped African Americans from voting. So 2 really big things. As soon as he becomes president, he manages to get passed. So that shows how it's a different power stance with Johnson in charge. Within 12 months, there are 400,000 newly registered Black voters. So it makes a big difference. And within 3 years, most of the Black population of the South had registered to vote. So he makes an immediate difference for those African Americans there. The Great Society program, he has Operation Head Start, which gets money to schools in cities to provide better education for the poor. Minimum wage increases again from $1.25 to $1.40. The Housing Act funds low-income housing. He has a home version of the Peace Corps. So the Peace Corps is an international thing. People are going away for that, but he has VISTA, which is volunteers in service to America. So they're not just making a difference abroad, they're making a difference in their own country. The Job Corps, which helps school leavers to get jobs. Medicare is passed under Johnson, and the Immigration Act ended racial quotas for people entering the USA, and safety standards were improved for customer products. So we can see that Johnson gets a lot more passed in a lot shorter period of time, but opinions on him do vary dramatically. So some people say he did more than many other presidents. So in 1959, 56% of African Americans lived in desperate poverty. By 1970, only 30%. That's still too many, but it's a massive decrease in that time. And white families saw a reduction in poverty from 18% to 8%. However, some people said he spent far too much on reforms. That would have been the Republicans, who don't like government spending. By the end of his first term in 1968, unemployment was increasing and there was rioting. So he doesn't solve unemployment. He fully supported and encouraged participation in the Vietnam War, which was very unpopular. And this will be the reason that he doesn't run for president again. He's very unpopular because of Vietnam. And he does not run for president again after 1964 when he wins that. So as always, by all means, go back and pause the video at any point so you can have a closer look at those slides and maybe make some notes. But that's just giving you a really quick overview of both of those two men. And in the next video, we're going to finish the course and have a look at the 1970s feminist movement. Okay, so please join me then. Thank you very much.